Hello friends. For today's video, I'm going to be going through 7 different adult fantasy standalones. I have done previous standalone videos in the past. Sometimes it's a mix of young adult and adult, and sometimes it is categorized where it's just adult or just young adult. Regardless, I will have the previous videos I've done in the description bar down below in case after today you would like to see some additional fantasy standalone books. But anyway, jumping into it, the first one for today would be the Goblin Emperor. I read this at the tail end of last year, which was 2022, and I really enjoyed it. It is a book that's going to require some patience, and I also think this is one of those fantasy stories that is very guilty of fantasy names being very excessive. There is intense names for people, there's intense names for places and things. It's just anything you can think of. There's going to probably be a really long fantasy name. Sometimes there's commas. Why do I always do that? Apostrophes, not commas. There's going to be apostrophes in the name sometimes. And I think that that makes it so that it's a difficult barrier of entry. However, if you are looking for peak political fantasy, this is it. The setup for the story is that you follow a young man named Maya, who at the very beginning of the story, there has been an accident that has led to the emperor and then other people in line to become emperor after that individual. They have all been killed. And now Maya is the person to be placed on the throne. He is half goblin on his mother's side. His mother has passed away. And his father was the one who was emperor, but he really wanted nothing to do with his son. He only really married this woman because it was convenient and it was a political alliance. And there is a son, but he's cast him aside. And so Maya has grown up essentially in isolation. He's grown up away from the politics and the maneuvering of all these people who plan to scheme and try to gain whatever they can from the system. And Maya has never been exposed really to any of that. And now he's finding himself thrust into this position where he has to figure out who he's supposed to trust, how to run a country, while also simultaneously trying to determine what caused all of the individuals who were in line before him to die. So he's got a ton on his plate. He is a fish out of water, but he is also a sweetheart. And he is just such a lovable main character. I do think that the overwhelming amount of fantasy names, as I was saying before, and just the sheer number of characters that he has to interact with, it is almost, it's essentially near impossible to keep track of it all. But I actually thought that that played really well into creating that experience that Maya is going through, where you're like, oh my gosh, who is this again? I don't know what this person wants. Is this the same person that seemed suspicious earlier? And I think that because he has to, from the time that he wakes up in the morning, he has to get dressed and then just talk to all these different people, and then he has to go meet with these advisors, and he has to go make an appearance at this place, and he has to interact with so many different people, and he has to make so many different decisions, and he has to do it with such little knowledge, so he has to try to figure out what are the pros and cons to all the different decisions that I would make. Just talking about it, I'm sure you're kind of thinking like, okay, it's a lot. It's a lot. I get it. It's a lot. And I think that that helps create that same I'm right there with you, Maya experience. So I thought it was so well done as far as political fantasy goes. It does move at a rather slow pace. For me, there was always something that made me want to turn the page. I always kind of wanted to see what would get thrown at Maya next, and I always kind of wanted to see how he would progress through the story, how he would handle all these situations. Is this power going to corrupt him? Is the pressure going to get to him, or is he going to stay the sweet young man that he is? So highly recommend Goblin Emperor, especially if you like political fantasy. After that, we have 2 cozier fantasy stories. I actually kind of think Goblin Emperor is cozy in a really bizarre way, just because it's slower going. Anyway, I don't need to keep going about Goblin Emperor. I've talked about it enough. But the next 2 are truly cozy, sweet, happy fantasy, and that would be Legends and Lattes and Tress of the Emerald Sea. Really quick, Legends and Lattes, you might have seen that there is another book coming out by this author, and I believe it's going to fit within that idea you see pretty often now of series of standalones, where you don't necessarily have to read them in chronological order. In fact, the next book that's being released actually takes place before the events of this book, so it is truly just going to be another story in this world. And the setup for this one, though, you follow this character named Viv. She's an orc who has just had enough of the violence. She wants to settle down, live a peaceful life, and really build something. And the thing that she decides that she wants to build is a coffee shop. However, she doesn't have an actual building. She has never really had experience working in business, and the area that she wants to set up this coffee shop in doesn't know what coffee is. And so she has a lot on her plate, but she is excited for the challenge. She's excited to do something that is really meaningful to her and to follow her dreams. And so you kind of can't help but root for her. I've said before that the stakes are very, very low in comparison to most fantasy books. It says right at the top. But I do think that when things go wrong, you care so much about her accomplishing her dreams that any hiccup in the road, you're like, no, and you're devastated. I think I said hiccup in the road. I think the phrase is bump in the road, but whatever, hiccups also, you get it, you get the idea. Anyway, so you root for Viv and you're excited for her, and the friends that she makes along the way are really sweet. The relationships are really, really precious, and it's just a lovely, cozy story. And then we have Tress of the Emerald Sea. This does take place within Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, but you do not have to read all the other Cosmere books in order to pick this one up. It truly can stand on its own, and the setup for the story, and I think really all you have to know, is that this is Sanderson's take basically on The Princess Bride. It is swapped, so you're actually following Tress, our main character, as she is setting off on an adventure to save the man that she loves. This leads her to go onto a ship and traverse this really, really dangerous seas. But the seas are not made up of water, they're made up of these spores, but the spores are incredibly, incredibly dangerous, and Tress doesn't really know what she's doing, but she knows she has to do something. And it's a very cheeky story. It's very, very silly. It's adult, but it definitely feels very, very family friendly. I think that not only did Sanderson capture the plot, essentially, of Princess Bride in a way that is, I think, uniquely his, but I also think that that tone is very, very well captured in this. Next up, we have some moody fantasy, and there's 3 for this. We have Last Tale of the Flower Bride, The Crane Husband, and then Piranesi. Oftentimes in my videos, I say at the beginning when I'm doing these longer lists that I will recommend books even if they didn't work for me, just because I know everybody's tastes are different and that different things are appealing to different people. And for most of this list, pretty much all of the books on this list but one, I really enjoy and I'm happy to recommend. This next one, I will recommend it, but I did not like it even a little bit. That would be Piranesi. I really did not care for this book. However, I don't think that that should deter you from giving it a try if what I'm about to tell you sounds interesting. The reason that it shouldn't matter is this book is so odd. And the reason that it really didn't work for me is that what I thought it was saying for a pretty good amount of the book, because you are going to have to theorize. So much of the story is, what the heck is going on? And so you have, maybe some people are just along for the ride. I was theorizing, and then I came up with a theory, and there were so many things pointing in the direction of, yes, indeed, you are correct, that is what is being discussed here, or that's what the theme is, that's what is being portrayed. And so I was really liking it. I kept wanting to flip the page. I read this in one sitting. It's also very short. But I was pretty captivated by it. And then when there's a reveal, I buddy read this with my husband. And because I read it all in one sitting, I was keeping notes in my phone as I was going. And I was writing out all these things that I thought were so moving and so captivating and so impactful. And then I got to a certain part and I wrote, the book is ruined. And the reason is that the reveal was, in my opinion, so much less about something really important than what I thought it was. The thing I thought it was really important, and it would have made it really, really moving, and I think it would have been a really profound way to talk about what I thought it was talking about. And then it turned out it was not that, and then what it turned out to be was something very different, and it was so unsatisfying for me. But you might be sitting here like, well, what is it even about? And that's the thing. You really don't want to, you don't want to know. It's such a bizarre book that you want to go into it and just be along for the ride. And for, I think, a lot of people, it's just how bizarre it is. A lot of people will tell you it feels like a fever dream. That is part of the appeal. And it's almost a mystery in a sense. It is kind of a mystery because you're trying to piece together what the heck is going on and what happened. And then as you're getting more and more of the clues, you think you know what's going on, and then the book will let you know whether you're right or wrong. So all I'll say is it's sort of like a very, very, very strange, maybe, portal fantasy. There you go. That's all you need to know about Piranesi. After that, Last Tale of Flower Bride and Crane Husband. The Crane Husband is very short. I think it actually could be considered a novella. Follows a young girl. It takes place in our own world. A teenage girl whose mother one day brings home a giant crane man. It's a crane, but it interacts with her like a human would, which is to say it's like a weird relationship. But as bizarre as that sounds, it is not perceived as a giant crane. Oh my gosh, what the heck? Why is there a giant crane man in our house? It's just, he is spoken of kind of like he's a person and as if it's totally normal. It is a retelling of The Crane Wife. There's sort of a spin on it. And the idea is that it is a metaphor for domestic abuse. And it is showing you what that does to a child, how quickly they have to grow up, how quickly their innocence is robbed. And the main character has a younger brother. So much of her life, she thinks, I can't just leave. I can't abandon my mother, but I especially can't leave my brother behind. Somebody has to take care of him. And she's also seeing the way that this abuse at the beak and talons of the crane, not sure how to word that, but the abuse from the crane's end toward her mother, she sees the way that it's affecting her mother as well. So it is a difficult read, but I think it's done very, very, very well. It definitely represents its subject matter. It's strange to say beautifully, but I think it does a very good job of showing that those circumstances. Last Tale of the Flower Bride is in some ways like a grim fairy tale. The setup for the story is you follow this young man who has his entire life been obsessed with fairy tales and with mythology and of the things that seem like stories, but maybe there's grains of truth within them. And part of why he has become so obsessed with this is because he will tell you that he had a brother when he was a child who died, and yet supposedly he never had a brother at all. And so he is determined because he is convinced he did. And so he wants to figure out if there's some kind of secret within these fairy tales that will reveal to him what might have actually happened to his brother. And in this pursuit, he meets this very odd, very mysterious woman that he just feels this pull to, and he sort of falls for this woman, and he's so captivated by her, and they get married, and she always tells him, don't ever ask about my past. But a family member of hers is dying, and that brings her back to her childhood home. Obviously, her husband comes with her, and as he is being there for her in this difficult time, he is also discovering secrets about her past, and he can't help but be curious. This story is very odd. It goes back and forth between present and past, but I also think it is an examination of what trauma does to the mind, and it's sort of built from the foundation of other fairy tales. It is the kind of story that I think is more thematic than it is character or plot driven. And the writing style is quite lyrical. It's not the kind of book that I would typically gravitate toward, and I think it's going to be appealing to a very specific kind of reader. But for me, the ending I really, really liked. I really enjoyed the way in which the themes were executed and how the idea of how trauma affects the mind. I think that was done very well in this. Last for today, we have The Magician's Daughter. I've mentioned this quite a bit recently, as it is a book that I recently completed, and I thought this was both delightful, but also it did such a good job of showing the hardships that people endure and exposing our main character to these things, and having a character that you root for, because as she is seeing the hardships that people are faced with, she wants to do something about it. She just doesn't have the skill set and the knowledge just yet. So the setup for the story is we follow this young woman. Her nickname is Biddy. Her entire life, she has lived on this island that is protected by magic, so nobody can really discover it. And she was raised by her guardian, who is very much like a father figure to her. And he is a magician. He also has a familiar, and it is a bunny, and it's really cute. It can turn to a person, and it can talk, and it's so sweet, and it loves them both so much. Anyway, so you are finding out that Rowan has some secrets in his past, and those secrets come knocking, and he wants to have Biddy accompany him to the real world, which is, it's historical fiction, so the real world is going into Europe and discovering what life is like for everyone else. And Biddy is very excited about this because she's never had the chance to leave her island. She wants to know what everything else is like out there. And then she's faced with a harsh reality when she realizes what life is like for everyone else. And also, is Rowan, as much as she's loved him, as much as he's been a father to her, is he as good of a person as she always thought he was? And so you're sort of uncovering those secrets of his past as Biddy is learning about them. That's it for some adult fantasy standalones. If you're interested in checking any of these out, I'll have them in the description bar down below, along with those other videos I've done talking about other fantasy standalones. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.